Hey you guys, this is book review number 2. Now I stated in my first video that not all book reviews were going to be on present day travel literature, that there would be some variety in books. And this will be the first variety. The book I'm going to review today is Bativia's Graveyard, so that'll come into focus, by Mike Dash. Now this was a historical book set in the 1600s, having to do with the Dutch East India Company in the Far East. Now, if you don't know, during this time period, the Dutch were one of, if not the most powerful country on earth, largely owing to their fleets that would leave Amsterdam and the Netherlands to come to the Far East, specifically Indonesia, for spice trade and other commodities trade, in which case they would bring those commodities and spices back to Europe in order to trade with the rest of Europe and make themselves gobs and gobs of money. Well, to get themselves to and from these places, they had to take ships, sailing ships. Now, at this time period, sailing was not an exact science. Many of them crashed, and this specific book, Bativia's Graveyard, has to do with a cargo ship that was leaving from the Netherlands for Indonesia and actually sailed too far south once traveling around the southern horn of Africa and hit the west coast of Australia, which at that point was only vaguely known. Small sections of its coastline were mapped, but was really sort of no man's land. It has to do with I believe it's a lieutenant. Yes, a lieutenant that took control of the island after the main captain left with a rescue crew for the island of Java in Indonesia, which is where the Dutch stronghold was at that time. And what happened is that this man was considering a mutiny while at sea, but the ship crashed before he could carry out the mutiny. So what he planned to do is, when the rescue crew came back, to commit mutiny against the rescue crew. Now, to do this, he needed loyal soldiers that would stay with him and be a very concise, strong group of mutineers. And of course, all the people that crashed on this island, which I should say was not actually on Australia, but was off the west coast about 100 miles. This little tiny island that was no more than, half a mile across. No more, oh geez, got distracted. No more than a half a mile across, so everyone was in a very confined space. So what he needed to do was essentially confine these people, and because there was no way to confine them in any sort of physical sense, what he decided to do was eventually kill off as many people as he could in order to just have his most loyal crew there when the rescue crew came, so he could overtake the rescue crew. And this man essentially led what we would call in the West a despot government. I mean, even though it wasn't a formal government, he was the head ruler, and with his 20 or so loyal band, killed off, I believe it is 120 of the 145 people that, non-mutiners, that landed on the island with him, through all sorts of depravity. But what I found particularly fascinating was his justification, which had to do with his, I guess what we would call nowadays, evangelical religion. And how he essentially said, because he had divine mandate, he essentially had the ethical and moral right to kill all these people. He was quite, of course, a delusional man, and even his delusion of what he was going to do after the mutineers, after he was going to take over the rescue ship with his mutineers, was unrealistic. He was most likely going to be tracked down and killed anyway. But during his 100 days or so on this island, he was able to kill off all these people. Now, the final battle took place between a group that had separated and gone to an island about 2 miles to the east, and their battle took place right when the rescue crew was coming back. So between the rescue crew and this battle going on at the right place, this man was eventually able to be overtaken along with his top lieutenants, who were all hung or killed on the island or killed later. So it was victory in the end, but not before a massive, massive killing. In particular, that sounds like a broad and not a very interesting topic, but what was really interesting was the psychology of how this man justified what he was doing during his rule on this island before he was eventually overtaken. It's a great book, kind of focuses on the psychology of an individual as well as the history of the time period, which is in great flux, having to do with economics, the age of discovery, the west coast of Australia, which was no man's land at that point, as stated, and in general was just a very good book. Not a travel book, but a historical book that focused on travel at that time period in the early 1600s. So I'll show it to you one more time. Bativia's Graveyard by Mike Dash. Highly recommended. See you later, you guys.